Welcome to episode 191 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week we play Finding Paradise. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have one friend with me, my first friend. He is the host of the greatest story ever played. It's Dan. Dan, hello!
Hey, thank you so much for having me back on.
Yeah, I mean, it is wild, one, that we have not played a game in this series since episode, I think, 19 in 2017, which is wild. But more crazy is that I believe you have not been on a show since episode 89, so almost 100 episodes ago when we talked about Firewatch. Confirm or deny that for me.
Yes, correct, which is wild. That is the way back. I had not realized it had been so long since I'd been on this show, specifically.
Well, yeah, because I've been on your show a whole bunch. So for folks who don't know what your show is, please tell folks about the greatest story ever played.
Yeah, so our show is called The Greatest Story Ever Played. We're kind of a book club style show like this one, except probably more of a focus on story-driven games. So things that you guys have covered before, like Life is Strange, or you mentioned we did Firewatch. We also did one on our show. Anything story-driven, Last of Us, that's the kind of stuff we play. So if you like those kind of games, or the one that we're going to be talking about, we would probably have a lot of games you like.
Yeah, I mean, you guys just lapped us. I think you're in the 200s episode-wise now. But the way I always like to talk about our shows, because you and I had a yearly date to talk about the Games in the Dark Picture series. Mm-hmm. So I've been on your show doing all of those. But I know that Katie's been on the show before, I believe, to talk about Heavy Rain and some other games.
Yep.
And so what I would do is, if you're a fan of this show and you're looking for more game club style podcasts, please check out The Greatest Story Ever Played. Find a show you like, or what I really like you do, Dan, is you actually put the Left Behind Game Club in essentially all of the titles where we are, so you can find something you like. So I know recently you had Flora from the show on Hellblade's Senua's Sacrifice. Katie was on Heavy Rain. I was on a whole bunch of shows, so it's a great show. If you like a deep dive on the story of your favorite games, go check that out. Again, that's The Greatest Story Ever Played on podcast services everywhere.
Yeah. I've had lots of people from this crew on many a time. So if you love Left Behind Game Club, there is definitely lots more guest appearances on our show if you want more.
Cool. Before we get into this video game, Finding Paradise, which is the second game in the To the Moon series, you can do us a couple favors. If you like the podcast and you've never left us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, please do so because it really helps. If you like the show, also send it to a friend because that's how people hear about new podcasts. And you can follow our show on Twitter at Left Behind Club because that's where we're sharing details about new episodes coming down the pipe. Just recently, you got an episode about telling lies. You've got this one, and we've got one episode planned for the rest of the year about Brutal Legend. Details for that will be shared on Twitter. So without further ado, let's get right into it, talking about Finding Paradise, developed and published by Freebird Games, available on Switch, Android, Windows, Linux, iOS, macOS, and Mac, originally released on December 14th of 2017. Let's start with the fast pitch, a one-sentence description of the game that we are about to talk about. Dan, as the guest, I feel like you must begin.
All right. I was thinking about this a bit today, and I think that this is a little inside baseball, but the real lesson was the friends we made along the way.
Ooh, very good. Very good. I love that. In my mind, I'm just going to go to, if shows like Normal People, devastate you in the heart sense. This is another one of those, but maybe not as well executed. Ooh, but we'll get into it. Before we start talking about the game itself, let's start with 2 questions. Dan, how'd you play this one? Because I remember when we did To the Moon, I played it on PC, and Mike, Mo, and I, when you go back to episode 19, I believe, you'll hear us talking about, some of us played it with a mouse and some of us played with a keyboard. I definitely played it on Steam Deck in my living room, sitting on the floor with a mouse on my coffee table, just mousing my way through it, which mostly worked, but I have reservations. Did you play this one on PC?
I did not. I actually played on Nintendo Switch.
Ooh.
And I guess also for a weird one, I played To the Moon on my phone, actually. So, yeah, a little different.
Interesting. And for Switch, because I know on Steam Deck, they want you to use the trackpad to almost use the controller like a mouse on Steam Deck. It can't be like that on Switch. So do you have direct character control in that one?
Yeah, so I use the joystick for movement, and I feel like this is a fair time to talk about it. The maybe back fourth of my game got really buggy. And there was one point where I couldn't get it to move, my character to move with the joystick, but the touchscreen worked.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so that was messy. And then actually probably 4 or 5 times after that initial time, my character got stuck and I'd have to like exit the game and come back.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, so it was kind of wild. I don't tend to have that happen with games, so I don't know if there's some bugginess on the back end of the port or maybe just bad luck for me. But the first 3/4 of the Switch experience was good, and the last fourth, not so much.
Well, when you said it was buggy, I didn't bother asking you what you were playing it on because I was crunching so hard to get the game done. I wasn't like, Dan, where to play it on? So I cannot do that. But I played it on Steam Deck and had no bugs, but the control, like not having a keyboard, I would say this is not really optimized for Steam Deck because if you're not plugged in, you have to use the trackpad like a mouse, which is not ideal. If you plug in a mouse, it also asks for a keyboard because in a couple places you actually weirdly need it. So I think honestly the best way to play this one from the sound of it is by just grabbing your PC and playing it with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I guess also, now that we're talking, I was kind of surprised to have the issues because I played To the Moon on my phone, so I have an Android, and it worked great, however many years ago when I played it. So I was a little surprised to have this one have issues.
Well, I think it's fair to say that this game doesn't really probably put a lot of pressure on the hardware because this one is a game that kind of comes from, my understanding, RPG Maker. And the graphics are quite simple on it, so it's not the thing that's going to really tear down your machine. So it can easily be ported to Android and iOS, I guess.
Yeah, that would be my guess too. Yeah.
We both played To the Moon, so this is the second game or second mainline game in what I would call the To the Moon series from Freebird and Kangao. There are some mini episodes in between, but this is kind of the second tentpole. I know we've both played it. Did you like To the Moon? Because I was quite a fan of it, and it's still a game that I think back on, and whenever people talk about, indie stories in games, if they ever ask us to put together like a top 10 or top 20 list, To the Moon might be on that list for me.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I played To the Moon back in 2020, and we did an episode on it back then. And I really liked it. I liked, just like this game, the look of it, kind of that like old Pokemon look. But then getting a cool, emotional, deep story and all of that. So I really liked To the Moon, and I've had this game, Finding Paradise, in my backlog for probably a few years. I think I put it on my wish list immediately after playing To the Moon, and I was like, all right, once it gets ported to Switch or phone or something, I'm going to check this out. And so I was definitely looking forward to getting to play this game.
Yeah, this is one that we've not played it on the podcast for like 7 years, and I was like, Dan, we must do this, or else it will never come to the feed. So I appreciate it. This one, if I had to describe it, it is much like the To the Moon game, where it is a adventure, somewhere between an adventure game and an RPG. But the RPG, you really take a lot of the elements out of it. Like there's no combat system mostly. There's no inventory system. There's no party system. It is literally just click around and really just discover things in the environment to push the story forward. Story being, in this one, much like To the Moon, Sigmund Corp is a company that has a technology that allows you to, especially when you're usually on your deathbed, you can go back in your mind, in your dreams, and create new memories and live out your biggest regrets. So in this game, the patient is Colin, and instead of the first game where there was a very clear dying wish, this one is sort of shrouded in mystery, where Colin essentially doesn't let Sigmund Corp know, like he's on his deathbed, but doesn't really let them know exactly the thing he wants. He's like, hey, I want my life to be different, but I don't want you to change anything to do with my family. Which, I don't know how you felt, but I was like, this is going to lead to a place that is tragic. I don't know what your thoughts immediately were when Colin sort of pitched his wish like that.
Yeah, the big thing I was wondering is like how would we figure that out? Because I think he said, right, don't change my family, but I want to lead a fulfilling life, and it's kind of like, what does that mean then? What does he want? He's
basically like, change everything but change nothing.
Right, totally, which are kind of the worst kind of clients to have.
Yeah. We are not going to do a full story deep dive here. If you are interested in doing that deep dive, we are actually putting an episode in both this feed and Dan's feed for The Greatest Story Ever Played, where you will be able to sort of listen to the extended cut, if you will. And so we're going to do like a really a shallow dive on the story, and then Dan will do the deep dive on Dan's show. But essentially with this one, unlike To the Moon, where you dive backwards, so you start when you're really old, and then you dive all the way back to when you were really young, and then move forward with the like regret out of the way and live a more fulfilling life. In this one, sort of the swirl that you end up in is that all of a sudden you are diving from, instead of going backwards, you dive from end old to young, back to a little bit younger on the old side, a little bit older. So you're basically hopping back and forth to this middle point where you think that there's actually an issue. But I will tell you, I didn't really figure out what was going on. I'm like, so to set the stage, your wife, Sofia, is someone that you're still happily married to, supposedly, when you're old, and your son is there, Asher. But you start to meet this woman, Faye, and Faye is someone who, when you go back to a young kid, Colin is only with Faye, and then all of a sudden, when he's later in life, he's with Sofia. And my thought for a long time, I don't know how you thought, but I'm like, oh, there's going to be a tragic plane crash because he's a pilot that's going to involve Faye, and that's going to really push him to marry Sofia. That was my thought. I don't know what your thought was.
Yeah, I really felt like it was, we were in for like the one that got away. And so,
yeah, 100%.
Almost like settling for Sofia of like, well, I guess I'll have this family instead of no family.
Yeah.
And that really felt like the immovable object, impossible force or whatever that phrase is, where two things hit each other that can't be. It's like, oh, I have this family that's second best, but also the love of my life. I thought that was going to be our conflict, and they changed it a bit on us.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say, like, we've already kind of spoiled part of this here, but we're going to spoil the whole story here. So if you're not interested in hearing spoilers about Finding Paradise, this may be your time to cut out. But Dan, I won't lie to you. The whole first two acts of the game are really just two portions. There are the doctors, who we've not really explained at all, from Sigmund. Those two doctors are Ava Rosaline and Dr. Neil Watts. They sort of run the machine inside of Colin's subconscious mind, and then there's the characters, obviously, that you're trying to change everything but change nothing with. And so for the first little while, you're meeting Faye when he's younger, and you're meeting Sofia when he's older. Stuff of like them having a kid, them going to Bora Bora for their honeymoon, him getting his retirement apartment. And then when you're younger, it's like band stuff. It's like, hey, he plays the cello. Hey, his friend. This is how he meets his friend Ava. Ava plays the piano, much like his wife Sofia. And it's not really until the third act where the game really, like, obviously you're living his whole life, and then you get to this third act, which I feel like we need to talk about the third act, because this is the part of the game that I think is bad.
Yeah, I think that this was the real change because, Act 1 and 2 feel a bit like To the Moon, right? They're pretty
100%.
similar, but different. Like To the Moon, you went oldest to youngest. This one, you ping pong back and forth, and you're like, okay, I'm learning the story a different way, but this feels like a similar game. And then, as you said, Act 3 comes along, and suddenly the game changes a bit.
Yeah, I'm going to read off the message that I sent to you because, again, I finished this game earlier today. And the third act twist comes in if the game is a 5-hour experience, the third act twist kind of comes in the last, I would say, 90 minutes. So I was finishing the last 90 minutes. And as I'm doing that, I sent you this exact message, which is, I need to say this about Finding Paradise, which I broke my cardinal rule of podcasting that I sent you messages, spoiler messages before we recorded. But I said, it's been a long time since I've been this disappointed by a game's third act run. You said, hey, yeah, kind of a weird turn for them to take. And I said, I won't mince words. It sucks that they decided the Assassin's Creed Desmond Miles stuff is more important than the core plot. So I guess the thing that we'll spoil here is that Ava is his imaginary friend. And not only that, and maybe, I think there are different yes, Faye, sorry. Faye is an imaginary friend. We can have our own interpretations of like how she came to be, but essentially with Faye, imaginary friend, and not only that, she has found a way to take over the simulation herself. And then it devolves into literally the Desmond Mile part of Assassin's Creed where you are fighting the program. Mm-hmm. What?
Yeah. Really weird choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I when you'd messaged me, I was like, all right, I don't want to like full answer you because save it for right now. Yeah. And it's weird as a story choice. But also, like, it's not fun as a gameplay choice either.
No, it is not. And I think, I want to give the game credit because I really love To the Moon. And I think that this game, there is 80% of this game that is actually really good. And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like the ending sort of redeems itself a little bit. Like, it gets to where it needs to go, but there is a middle, from 3.5 hours to 4.5 hours in this thing, just like a very weird choice to make it about, hey, you really have to take down the program that, from my understanding, you basically put a vulnerability, one of your characters put a vulnerability in the hardware that she exploited the imaginary friend in a way that's never been exploited before, and you have to do a bunch of mini games that on a mouse are quite bad. And then the game kind of comes around to, honestly, if you took that hour out of the game and just replaced it with like a bunch of sad realizations of, hey, he actually just was longing for, he was very lonely for a long time, had an imaginary friend, was always longing for more, and it took that imaginary friend to make him realize that his life was actually pretty good. I think that's a stellar game. Mm-hmm. But then you have this very weird hour that is not good.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the thing, is that at the end, I feel resolved positively on the game. But the way we got there at the end is so bizarre. Because I think the idea of recognizing that your imaginary friend is helpful along the way and those sorts of things, and then having to give up your imaginary friend and all of that. Oh man, that's great. That's a lot of turmoil. That's interesting. But doing Mortal Kombat fighting and turning into an airplane and stuff
and being a shmup at one point, and then even doing a turn-based RPG that is a puzzle, is not like an RPG. It's you actually have to figure out how to bring in a companion character because they're the only way to really beat that thing. It's not good. and I played it with a mouse, and control-wise, it didn't work very well without a mouse and keyboard. Like I almost at one point, because it took me about 2 or 3 times to beat the shmup, and 2 or 3 times to beat the fighting game, I almost went downstairs and grabbed a keyboard to plug into my Steam Deck. Like that's the point we got to.
Okay, this is interesting. So you could beat them.
It took a lot of finesse and a lot of trial and error on the mouse, but I was one loss away in both the shoot 'em up and the fighting game to plugging in a keyboard.
Okay, that's good to know. Playing on Switch, it was messy, but also I assumed that you couldn't win, so I would try each battle once, and then I was like, oh, you can't win, so I just need to give up.
So what happens? So that's a great point. So these, these sections where they have mini games, if you die, there's an option when you get beaten where it's either like, do you accept your fate, or do you accept this decision, or do you want to try again? And I just figured like something bad would happen if I chose not to do it again. So what happens when you don't do it again? Do you just like pass it?
Basically, it kind of moves you to the next one. So
Man,
while this
what?
is happening, right, you have each kind of like memory island that's sort of under siege, and you go to it and you're trying to like redeem the memories, and you have the battle. During my battles, because I would lose them because I'd give up because I thought I couldn't win, your memory island would like go away. And so I went through each memory island. I think there's 6 in all, and when they were all gone and I couldn't get any of them, Dr. Rosaline showed up and kind of saved the day.
So making the whole thing pointless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too. Until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
And Jacob McCoy.
with many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
So again, I don't mean to harp on it really hard because I think that I really love To the Moon, and there is 80% of a very, very good game here. But just design-wise, I don't understand design and story-wise, I don't understand why we were made to play these mini games that aren't good. Because I think that there's some fun writing in these, and sometimes there's fun references to other pieces of media. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the last one they had, they referred to Dragon Ball Z and referred to Street Fighter in a way that's always cool. Mm-hmm. And so I like the writing in that, but just these references to games, and they're just like not great versions of a fighting, like a Flash game for fighting and for a shmup, and it just like did not work. And to have the technology or the meta narrative become the narrative here was not what I expected, and frankly not really what I wanted.
Right. Yeah. I think even maybe too much of a thing. If it had happened once, it might feel like, oh, that was really cool.
Yeah.
But instead it was an hour of it. And so instead you're like, oh, I've played games like these that are good, and this one isn't that thing. But when it's in its lane, so to speak, or what it's good at, it's good. And thankfully the game ended well, because I don't know if you feel this way, but for me, after beating this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up the third game someday. And I feel like I have readjusted expectations based on this experience, but it didn't leave me with the all right, this is done.
Yeah, I'm there with you where there's almost 2 moments that bookend the rough parts of it, where I think there's a moment where you go up to a hill with Faye, and there's this like really beautiful skyline, and there's almost this, because most of the game is done in RPG Maker, and then there are these hand painted moments where I think there's maybe like 2 or 3 of them, and they're so beautiful. And both times there are, if I cried 4 times, because I listened to the old episode of Left Behind Game Club, I cried 4 times when playing To the Moon. I cried twice with this one, and it was really just the very beautiful moment between. Actually, I think they were both in the final. Maybe they were both in the final hour, but there's a moment between Faye and Colin where they're just kind of sitting on top of a hill. It's hand painted. It's beautifully animated, and she basically says something like, "Hey, wherever you are, I'm going to be with you. You don't really need me anymore because, like, look at your life. It's amazing." And look, I'm almost crying right now thinking about it. And Colin just thanks his imaginary friend for teaching him how to fly. And then at the end of the game, when you essentially go through your life and realize that, hey, your life was actually pretty good. Oh man, I'm actually crying. Holy shit! Holy shit!
Holy man!
Shit. Holy shit!
Wow.
So again, that's what I'm so conflicted with this, because I'm telling you what happened and I'm crying. So it hit me, but there's just this weird hour in there in a 5-hour game that I just don't agree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's also beautiful.
No, yeah. It's such a conflict there of like that point right there, that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Hits such a thing, You've been my friend who has gotten me this far.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not real, and I need to live my real life now.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
And look, there are breadcrumbs put throughout of, at one point he essentially says, like, I just want one more, like, through the first couple of hours, when you flip back and forth from young and old, the imaginary friend Faye, she's kind of she's less present in the story as he's getting older, to the point where he's about to fly a plane for the first time, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially it is, hey, I don't think you need me anymore. Are you talking to that girl? Like, you met that girl. What do you think? Where I was like, oh no, he's either going to leave Faye for Sofia, or there's something tragic that happened, but no, she's actually imaginary, so she's encouraging it so that he can move on with his real life.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point he's just like, I just want to see you one more time. And then at the end of the game,
mm-hmm.
Holy shit, Dan, he sees her one more time, and it's like devastating, man, for real. Holy smokes.
it really is. And how you get there of, she teams up with Dr. Watson Rosaline in the dream space, and it's like, I think I know what will grant him his wish, and it's that, like, last conversation and helping him accept that you did live a fulfilling life, like, what a thing. And I think for this whole game, right, I would imagine most people, especially on their deathbed, would want to live a fulfilling life way more than all the other things you'd fulfill in. And I don't know. I'm glad this made me think about that as a game,
Yeah, I mean, I think Ken and his team do a really great job of writing good dialogue. Maybe not the kids' dialogue, because like there's only really one voice for these characters, but I think these characters are really pretty well written. And then there's always, like, they know how to pull on your heartstrings.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the end, it is that question of, like, do you still have any regrets? And I think his answer is something like, yeah, I do, but I don't want to take any of my life back because my life was pretty great. Mm-hmm. And in the end, to sort of realize that there's this green book that has been in the entire game, which has been this omnipresence in there, where I'm just like, oh no, this is where he's hiding his, like, ooh, I cheated, or ooh, these are my... I thought for a while he was actually writing a story about him and Faye being together, and that was the green book, and then maybe it was going to be published. I don't know. But essentially you just find out that he's been writing secret messages to his family that after his death they get to read, which I presume we don't get a resolution on that, but the assumption there is that he just recounts how great his life has been to his family. Because there's this thread in there of him and his wife, Sofia, when they were going through the process of this procedure, where she was like, hey, I don't understand why you need this. I think you've had a pretty good life, but I support you, and I love you, and I don't want to know anything about it. Like, I trust you so much to get what you need out of this, that you just go for it. I just don't want to know. I'm here for you. I support you. I love you. I don't want to know, which is wild. And I'm glad that there was a resolution there, even though we didn't get to see it in the flesh.
Right. You knew that they had it, which was good. But you're right. I mean, what a wild thing. And that she has the kind of relationship where she's willing to trust Colin in like a pretty outrageous request, you would think that most people would be really mad.
I want to spend a bunch of our money to live out my regrets in my life with you.
Right, for sure. And then you're like,
and I won't tell you what they are. It's not like, hey, I had a very specific regret where I wish I went down this career path, or I wish that this one thing that could have changed the path of my life didn't go this way, but it had nothing to do with you. He's literally like, hey, I'm happy, but I'm not happy, and let me live out my life, but I won't tell you what I'm going to change.
Right. Yeah. That's it would be tough to not feel crapped on if you're his wife or son, and you're like, oh, cool. But yeah, they handled this really well. Like the topic at large.
Yeah,
it was good.
Which really all that he wanted was confirmation that, his life was good, and that, like, yes, will he have regrets? Yes. Oh man, I've never cried this much on a podcast ever. I think Mike and Mo are going to listen to this and be like, you little soft boy. But really he just wanted confirmation that, like, his life was good. And that, yeah, sure, he'd have regrets, but everybody has regrets. And the regrets are almost as important as, I'm not making sense here, but like, the regrets are good because there's usually stuff that's great that happens in your life too that sort of offset that.
Yeah, right. Well, because like regrets are part of being a person, right? Like you or like having pain in your life, right? I don't want pain in my life, but if I had like a numb kind of life, sure, maybe I would not experience pain all the time, but I also wouldn't experience like the good things of life either. Like you, to have a heart that's open to feeling things, like you have to accept both. And I think Colin's problem is probably pretty relatable to everyone, where you're like, I like my life, but like, is it fulfilling? Like, it could be easy to have that question and then, end up at Sigmund Corp. Like,
I think in society we have this problem, and not to, be an anthropologist at all here, but we have this problem where it doesn't matter how much that we have. We always have a longing and a wonder if there could be more. And so I think this is, like you said, an incredibly relatable story where, look, this just shows you that, like, sure, could you have more money? Could you have more family? Could you have a better house? Could you have, had that job that you had a little more prestige? Sure. But when you look back at your life, especially in the end of this game, like you do, I think you'll find in most cases that, there's a lot of good stuff to look back on.
Mm-hmm. And that relationship is the most important, really.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to talk about and think about and stuff. So I don't know. I think that's something cool here for sure.
The end song, I think it would be really careless of us not to talk about the music here and say that in this game as well, the music in this thing is fantastic. It is mostly composed by Ken, and then there is a song from is it Lauren Shigaraki or Shigihara that did a song for the first one as well, and it is just a song that closes the credits and it's just very beautiful. I don't know if you had thoughts about the music.
Oh, same. Loved it. Both, the OST, like To the Moon, great. And then also having a song with vocals, for playing a game that's just instrumental, 99% of the time. When you get that one poignant song at the end, you're like, oh my gosh, it's good. They do a good job here. And that made me, from To the Moon, that was something I was excited about coming into this, was like, all right, if it's got To the Moon vibes, I'm already like 80% in.
Yeah. And that one is Wish My Life Away, is I think the track that has her vocals on it. You honestly, the one thing I haven't done yet that I will is that I'm going to listen to the soundtrack this week. I just hope that I can do it without crying, because I won't lie to you. I played about half an hour of this on my lunch today, and it was a section where I cried, and I definitely had a meeting with my boss right after I'd cried a whole bunch.
Right. You're like,
don't tell my boss. I'm sure she probably didn't notice, but my eyes were definitely probably a little more bloodshot than she's used to.
You're like, oh, I swear, I was just cooking before this. I was chopping onions and all that.
Yeah, I was crying because I'm working so hard.
Right.
I'm just so tired from working so hard for you. But we've talked about the story. We're gonna talk about it more on the Greatest Story Ever Played. We'll make sure to link that in the podcast notes, so that if you want a little bit more of a deep dive here on the story, we will do that on Dan's show. But Dan, a shorty today, but any final thoughts on Finding Paradise before we close this episode?
Yeah, I think last thing I would say is, even though you've had some spoilers in here, if you haven't played this, I think the experience is still worth it, even with that messy third act. I'm glad I played. I think even just talking about the imaginary friend stuff for a while here, I'm feeling more positive about this game than I did before we got here.
I'm in the same boat as you, where I think To the Moon is a hard recommend. It is a game that whenever folks talk about indie narrative-focused games, I bring up To the Moon a lot, because that one was emotionally devastating. This one is, I think if you liked To the Moon, as long as you go in knowing that maybe the story for a little bit won't connect with you, I mean, just go in with your expectations tempered a little bit, that it's going to get a little weird, but in the end, it'll probably pay off in a way that you like.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something. If you like To the Moon, I think there's a good chance you'll like this. If you didn't like To the Moon, don't play this.
Yeah, easy. Very easy. Cool. Dan, again, thank you for coming on the show today. If folks want to find you on the internet, where's the best place they can do so? I love your Twitter account. I'm not going to call it the other thing, but you do a great job of cultivating a community of people playing old games. So tell us where we can find you there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at StoryEverPod. I'm on there pretty regularly, asking questions, dialoguing with people. I know that that place is not so good now, so
no.
Maybe we need to leave and go somewhere else, but we're there right now, and I love engaging with people about games, so definitely hit me up there.
Sweet. That is our episode. So before we close, like I said, we've got one more episode coming, likely in the feed later this year, about Brutal Legend. More details on that on our Twitter account, at Left Behind Club. You can find me on all things at Jacob McCourt, JACOBMCCOURT. I am on Twitter. I will not call it the other thing. I'm on Blue Sky. Weirdly, I'm jacob.bsky.app. I believe I got Jacob, which is crazy, because I think I was one of the first 500 users on that platform. So let's hope it sticks. But I'm there everywhere. And if you haven't done this favor and listened to my other podcast called Crossplay Conversations yet, please do so. It is a topical game show, so very different than this. We are mostly talking about new indie games that are coming out. So if that's your shtick, then you can find us, Crossplay Conversations, on all major podcasting platforms. That is our show for today. So with that, my friends, that is one less game left behind.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories.
immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
Blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
And on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there. So we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.